This thing had the potential to be a powder keg. You got thousands of pro-gun supporters rallying at the state capitol in Richmond, Virginia on, of all days, MLK Day. Tensions rising even higher after a state of emergency was declared by the governor. Arrests were made. Some white supremacists were linked to the gathering, but thankfully, nothing turned out to be a replay of Charlottesville. A tense scene today in Virginia. A senior state official estimating 22,000 people converged in the capital of Richmond, many of them armed, outside the temporary gates with long rifles and even tactical gear. Those in protest of a new proposed gun control legislation.
It's just great to see the camaraderie and the diversity of people that are coming out just to talk about their rights.
Officials and law enforcement in the state on high alert, carefully screening each person in attendance, worried about a credible threat of potential violence from hate groups joining the protest. 7 alleged white supremacists with ties to the neo-Nazi group The Base, they've been arrested. Authorities saying at least 3 of them had been planning to attend. The governor declaring a state of emergency and banning weapons from the site.
We're seeing threats of violence. We're seeing threats of armed confrontation and assault on our capital.
Those actions firing up many of the protesters, claiming this was just another example of the government infringing upon their Second Amendment rights.
I think it's absolutely tyrannical what the governor's trying to do today. And our country was based on making a stand.
The president then weighing in this afternoon, tweeting, "I will never allow our great Second Amendment to go unprotected." Now, if you think it's a coincidence, you'd be wrong that today's organizers chose Richmond, Virginia. It's just 75 miles from Charlottesville, where, as you remember, white supremacists sparked the most divisive racial incident in recent memory, which was, of course, followed by this.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. You had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Now, the president couldn't resist from chiming in today regarding Richmond, tweeting what else? That over the weekend, the Second Amendment, in his eyes, under attack, and Democrats will take your guns away, and then repeated it again on Twitter this morning. Now, white nationalism, white supremacy, the Klan, they've held unfortunate places in American history since the dawn of this nation. Now, at one point, it wasn't uncommon to see Klansmen in robes and hoods marching through Washington or even invading the 1924 Democratic Convention in New York City. Fred Trump, the president's father, he was arrested at one of those events. But it seemed to be turning against that trend in the 80s or 90s. Most reports of Klan rallies would end like this one in Buffalo, where you had a handful of Klansmen outnumbered by counter-protesters. Other times, permits for rallies, they'd be denied, or the groups would rethink and cancel their events. It was more a sideshow than anything else. Now, some claimed we had solved racism in America with the election of the nation's first black president in 2008. We knew better. Racial animosity, though, it didn't hide for long. It rose its ugly head in recent years, and it reached the state where it's at today when a man claimed Barack Obama was born in Kenya and was elected president in 2016. And to discuss this and other issues of importance on MLK Day 2020, we turn to our panel tonight. It's a good one. Jerica Richardson, she's former spokesperson for the New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, and for one-time U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara. We have Reverend Thomas Mims here with us. He's a pastor of the First Baptist Church of Greenwich and also chaplain for the Greenwich Police Department. Mayo Bartlett, he's an attorney of the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLC. He's also a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. And Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. And guys, for the next hour, there's a lot to get to. I want to get to policy stuff. I want to get to the politics of all of it. But where are we? And in the last 3 years, from a tone standpoint, it just seems, Jerica, and we'll talk about it in the racial component, but the edge that, there's a tension out there. And when this rally was even set up, and thankfully it didn't turn into as bad as a lot of people thought it might have, originally here we go again. It's palpable, hasn't it?
I think you can feel it. Guns have become a huge issue in this country. I think we've seen with the rise of mass shootings, I think the United States of America is probably the leader in mass shootings. It's something that's, I think, on the forefront of everyone's minds. It's something that we have young people that are really challenging it every day. And as you saw through the rally, there are people that feel that their rights, their Second Amendment rights, are under attack, although I don't think that is what a lot of the people that are calling for more gun control and safer laws, I don't think that's what they're trying. I don't think that their goal is to take guns away, but I think it's just an issue that's going to continue.
And we'll talk about the president next segment, but on a broader level, get away even from guns for a moment, Reverend. On Sundays, you know, and I've known some interfaith stuff after some of the tragedies where synagogues have been targeted, other houses of worship. It's been all over the place. It's just, it feels like we've gone back in time in a certain way. And maybe it's been there the whole time and people feel free to say some of the ugliness that maybe they wouldn't have said in mixed company before, but maybe they are now. I don't know what it is, but it just feels every day when you get up, who said what, who's doing what are they doing now?
I agree with that. I agree with everything you said. Here's the thing about this rally in Richmond. The ordinance, the law that's trying to be amended and instituted, it's I believe everyone who purchases a gun needs to have a background check. And you can only purchase one handgun per month. That's it. That's the heart of it. So the politics of it really showed itself for me today when one of the people at the rally in a mask with a rifle said to the camera that this is a human rights violation. Are you kidding me? You're going to apprehend the language and the spirit of the civil rights movement so that you can advocate for a particular party in a particular position on the Second Amendment? That's crazy.
Richard, again, we're going to talk about some of the numbers because the president's talking about the economics. I'll get to that in a minute. But do you wake up even sometimes saying, oh, God, what do they say now? Or why do they pick Virginia? Why do they pick MLK Day? That even if there's debates to be had in this country, it seems that there is a conscious attempt by some to light the match when they do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line is in this country, when you take a hot button issue like guns or abortion, there's always going to be some type of organizing around those particular hot button issues.
But do you really think it's a coincidence they picked MLK Day to do the rally?
Well, they were off today, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. It could be something. My point is, it could be something as simple as that. It could be, or it could be something that was intentional. I don't really know. But again, the point is, these are hot button issues, and any restriction on the Second Amendment is an issue, just like any restriction on abortion is a particular issue. It's a hot button issue.
I only say
so
this.
it's not. It's
You're
a matter of time.
But
It's not a matter of
you look at
timing.
any polling right now. America could barely agree when it's light or dark out. Okay, talk about the sun. Okay. That said, 90% of this country wants background checks. Okay, universal. I mean, there are limits that we actually as a country agree on, but where I get into trouble is when leadership on the government level finds the fringe and says, I'm with you. That's where I get a challenge. Now, I want you to weigh in because it's not just the feelings of this. There is obviously a tangible element to this, which is about policies. And it's not just at gatherings in Charlottesville like we saw years ago or even in Richmond today, but also, many say, from the policies coming out of the Oval as well. Now, the Trump administration has proposed major cuts to food stamps, to the school lunch program, adding work requirements for Medicaid, other cuts to social safety net that have helped more than 47 million Americans stay out of poverty. These cuts, they would hurt the poor and the working poor of every stripe here. This isn't just people of color, including, though, a lot of people in that population. And to that end, and again, I mentioned before, you spent a lifetime in criminal justice. It seems in some ends when we're making major changes to bail reform, et cetera, there are some other conscious efforts, even though we're cutting taxes for the wealthiest among us, that go disproportionately and intentionally on those who have it the least.
Well, it's interesting because a large percentage of the president's base are poor people. And a lot of them are poor white people, and they actually receive more subsidies from the federal government than all of the minorities combined. So if you look at where the food stamps go, where the lunch programs are, they typically are in Appalachia, in places that are blue-collar towns, that are company towns that are dying because the company left. And a lot of these policies ultimately hurt those people. And I think that there's a hope almost on the part of the people making these policies that the folks don't actually understand what the policies really mean. So if you look in West Virginia recently, a coal train was blocked because the miners who were instrumental in getting President Trump elected now realize almost 4 years later that there are no more coal jobs, that they're not getting paid all this money, and that coal is on its way out. Now, what could have occurred is that it could have been a bipartisan effort to bring actual meaningful jobs to coal miners who are industrious people. My grandfather and my great uncle were coal miners. They would have much rather been making solar panels and maybe being the world's leader there. But it's also the politics of fear. So if you are not somebody dependent on subsidies and you watch this and you see crowds, you tend to think, oh, wow, you know, these people are supporting Donald Trump. And when you talk about the government's going to take the guns, well, who's the government? Right now, the government's a Republican administration led by Donald Trump.
Here's the thing I don't get, Jerica, and you're the policy person here. It's a rounding number in the federal budget. You got to work at it to go after school lunches or to go after, food stamps. Compared to the monies, I mean, we've cut taxes here, and obviously spending is through the roof on certain things. You have to go out of your way to go after this. I don't get it. Like, what's the upside? I get the pandering to the base and all that, but he said it right. There's more people in more of the Ohios and the West Virginias and states like that that are going to be hurt by this than states he was losing anyway. I don't get the policy play to it.
I mean, you said it. He's pandering to his base. But I think it's a really interesting issue because here we are on MLK Day and we're thinking about Dr. King. And I think one of the things that he did towards the end of his life where he focused on poverty and poverty across racial lines. And that was one of the things that he thought was a way to unite people. And he rallied people around this issue of economic justice. And so I think it's interesting. We're going to see how this plays out. While the president may be pandering to his base, it may backfire. You may actually get a lot of people more focused on the economic issue and recognize that there's a lot more that they have in common than they don't.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about obviously the person that's at the center of this, the president himself. He says he's the least racist person on the planet. We have interesting poll numbers that just came out about African American voters and see if they agree or not with the president. We'll be right back with that after this.